Okay,
Okay, we are recording.
we are recording now. Do we have your permission to record you?
Yes, you do.
Okay, and you likewise have our permission to record us and
Yeah.
share the video and tell everybody. So the way we like to do this a little bit, you and I talked earlier on the week, sort of a repeat of that. But let's start off with, would you introduce yourself, who you are, what your background is, how we came to meet, just a little bit about you and the way that you like to present it.
Okay. Well, my name is J.R. Myers, and I've been involved in, I guess, civics in politics and community activism for many years now, primarily in what you would call the third party or alternative party movements, including the Libertarian, the Reform, the Alaskan Independence, the Constitution Party, and now the Life and Liberty Party. So I'm running for president, and I hope to be on the ballot. I'm going to hopefully appear on the ballot of the American Independence Party in California, and also the Constitution Party in Idaho, and then possibly, hopefully, the Life and Liberty Party ballot in Arkansas. So at least 3 states, hopefully, I'll be running in. So I believe in forming issues-oriented coalitions, and I've based my political philosophy on the United States Constitution, and so most of my positions are based on that, derived from constitutionality. So I believe that the Life and Liberty Party is a centrist party, because I believe the Constitution is a centrist document. So some people might characterize me as conservative or right wing, but I reject those characterizations as mischaracterizations, because I think if you're founded or based on the Constitution, then you're centrist. So I like to think of myself as a centrist politically, because some of my positions might appear to be liberal and others might appear to be conservative and others more independent, but it just depends on how it filters through the Constitution, according to my understanding. So currently I'm in Montana, but I do maintain ties. I just returned from Alaska, and I am still involved with the Alaska Constitution Party, which I founded about 10 years ago now. And that just exceeded the 500-member mark of enrolled registered voters. I had been involved with the Alaskan Independence Party, as I mentioned before that, and that party was a secessionist party. It was founded to assert the sovereignty of Alaska, and also to claim that the vote for statehood in 1958 was illegal, and so that party wanted a revote, and I became the vice chairman of that party eventually, although I myself maintained the right of there to secede. I never advocated secession at that time for various reasons. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic. So I think you can, appreciate and understand and advocate the right for autonomous political subdivisions to determine their own future destinies without actually advocating that that's the course that they necessarily should take.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, let me ask you,
So,
you
go
were
ahead.
the highest ranking officer with the Alaska Independence Party at some point?
Well, I was the vice chairman, so I nearly became the chairman, but I decided not to at the time, which because just a long story, I won't get into that, but Lynette Clark remained chairman and I remained vice chairman, but then shortly thereafter I ended up founding the Alaska Constitution Party. But that's all history.
So could you explain for the audience here in California, like we talked about last night, what was the way that the Alaska Independence Party thought that they were going to secede, and why did they want to
Right.
secede? How were they planning to do it, and what were the reasons?
Right. So Joe Vogler was the founder of the Alaskan Independence Party, and he had gotten into contact with the Iranian government, and they were going to present it before the United Nations to have a vote to see, if they would allow a revote, since that's who it was originally through, because Alaska was a territory. I guess the United Nations, was overseeing that process under international law, and there were 4 outcomes. So Alaska could remain a territory, it could become a separate and independent nation, it could accept Commonwealth status, or become a state. And so they wanted that to happen because they maintained that the natives of Alaska were effectively disenfranchised, so they didn't get their say in it because of the English literacy laws. And then also that the military and their dependents were shipped in and then encouraged to vote, and so that made the difference. And so they many people that followed Joe Vogler didn't feel that it was a legal vote, so they tried to get it through the United Nations. So he needed a sponsor, and that sponsor was going to be Iran. And so just prior to it coming to the United Nations, he was found murdered at his place near Fairbanks. It looked like, the official story, I believe, was it was a robbery gone awry. But
No,
Lynette Clark always maintained that he was assassinated because he was bringing the issue before the United Nations via the Iranians. Anyhow, I don't know, what really happened. I wasn't there, but these things happen, and it is serious business when you start talking about secession and the creation of new nation states. I mean, look what happened when America was created, when we revolted against Britain. And so anytime a new nation is created, the potential for great turmoil and violence exists. That's why I think it's important to embrace the constitutional mechanisms for peaceful democratic change, so we can avoid violence.
Yeah.
Anyway, further reason to support civic dialogue. Anyway.
right. And so I have a question for you. What's the inclination or the majority? How do they take the Alaskan people in general? How do they take to the concept of independence? Is there a majority for that yet, or is it just a starting movement like it is here in California?
Well, I think the population is probably pretty divided. And right now, I think Alaska is in a lot of upheaval politically. I think a lot of the native people would still want independence, because I don't think that they feel, and I don't want to speak for everyone in Alaska, that would be preposterous, but I have spoken to many people over the years, and I think that many of them would vote to secede and form their own nation, actually, if they could. I don't know if that would be a majority of the entire population at this time, but I think it would be a surprising amount of people that would be in support of it. I haven't seen any recent polls on that. Perhaps you could do some research. Maybe there have been. I don't know of any, but
So
there's a strong independent streak there anyway. Go ahead.
okay, so there's a serious conversation going on about it. At least it's being talked about.
Oh, it has been for many decades. That's the whole premise of the Alaskan Independence Party. Although their fortunes have waxed and waned, and they're not that entirely active at this point in time. And Alaska, like many other states, has increasingly erected tougher ballot access barriers and requirements. And so now we find in Alaska that the Greens and the Libertarians were recently removed from the ballot. So the Alaskan Independence Party remains the only option besides the Republicans and Democrats in Alaska. So they do maintain a great deal of support through voter registration. I think they have over 17,000 registered voters in their party, which maintains their party's status in Alaska. But again, the Greens and the Libertarians have been knocked off the ballot. So that does show that they do retain a base. So yeah.
This is CALEXIT.
And what's your view on the legality, the peaceful possibility of seceding from the United States? The reaction that the United States would have. Do you think it's possible to do it in a legal manner, peaceful manner, or there's always that debate of it's going to be a civil war. If you get out of, they'll never let you leave. The rest of the U.S. won't let you leave. How do you feel about that? What's your opinion?
Well, I think it has to be a serious and robust discussion, a dialogue about it, to look at all the nuances involved, because you're talking about so many different factors. And so, again, theoretically or in principle, I think it's possible, because I believe that that's how this nation was founded. So if we said that, oh, we can found this nation by this mechanism, but no subdivision can, take the same course of action, then that just undercuts the very foundations of our nation. So, in accordance with the revolution, the American Revolution, I would say that any political subdivision that finds itself, the people therein that find themselves at odds with irreconcilable differences, as it were, then they should have the right to air their grievances, and we should have a right. I think that initially, I personally, I'm not in favor of California seceding in any way, but I think that if they want, what?
We've got you on film saying that.
Well, I'm not, but I don't want any part of the United States to secede, because I think, we should be able through our system to discuss our differences and work it out. And sure, other states should be different, so we shouldn't have a strong federal government that's imposing a one-size-fits-all on all the states anyway. But again, yes, if California has grievances, they should be aired, and we should try to reconcile them. If we can't do it, then that people in those areas, I would say like congressional district or county, I wouldn't want to go. I would be really begrudgingly say, oh yeah, the whole state of California, goodbye. But no, I think if we did it that way by different subdivisions, but it would also then have to go through the Congress. And I think, in order to avoid violence, the Congress would have to assent to it, just like it does when states are admitted to the Union.
Yeah, sure.
So, but I don't think we should be afraid of such a political discourse. Why, I think we refine our system through, honest public discussion and debate. And so, and we need to know and understand why people are feeling the way they are in order to make corrections and address their grievances. And hopefully it's possible. Maybe it's not possible, but we shouldn't have to resort to violence if it's not possible. There should be a mechanism, to make it a peaceful separation if it must be, but that would be a last resort.
Okay, so in your opinion, you're still at the stage of saying we need to have a stronger discussion about resolving our problems before we think about the secession, and you're not there yet. You're not seeing. You're
right.
You can reconcile still, that you believe we could reconcile, or Alaska could
right.
reconcile with the U.S.
or any of the states, because I think part of it is the federal system and the attitude of the federal system towards the states. So I think if we can disempower some of the federal government and re-empower the states, and allow for more diversity or variance within the states, so to speak, then that might be part of the issue there, that we don't have one federal government imposing, like I said, a one-size-fits-all on everyone for everything, which is what it seems like we've come to.
Interesting. You were saying that there is the risk of violence if we secede, but not all secessions have been violent or split up of national states. I'm thinking the Velvet Divorce between Czech or Slovakia. Okay, Slovakia wanted a more federal republic, and the Czech said, "Yep, either you keep coming to Prague, and we don't devolve any power to Bratislava, or within the European Union framework, which helped a lot, you can go ahead and go it alone." So they voted to become a separate country. They have been ever since. It's Czech or Slovakia. The Canadian case is a interesting contrast between that and the United States. Of course, it had been indigenous, and then it was part of French North America. And, that was all resolved by violence. And of course, the American Revolutionary War, they were on the losing side, and they became refugees to Canada. But an interesting thing happened. Okay, after the US recognized Canada and Canada recognized the US and the UK recognized them all. The interesting thing that happened was that the Canadians kept pushing for their own parliament. They would be in a political association with the UK, recognizing its sovereign as theirs, but they wanted their own parliament. And in 1867, they got it. And the very first thing they did, and this was the first throughout the Commonwealth, and that was to make their government responsible
to their parliament, not to the sovereign. They call the Responsible Government Act. So it doesn't have to be violent to
Well,
two nation states.
I hear what you're saying. However, the true history of Canada includes the Riel Rebellion and the Métis people who rose up and tried to declare their independence in what is now Saskatchewan, basically, and they were crushed by the Canadians. So you maybe want to refine some of your Canadian history.
Well, I'm aware there's a lot of, and another one's the Mackenzie Revolt, of course, even before that, 1837. Okay, so yeah, there's plenty of violence to be going around, but it's not a necessary thing. There are, what I'm doing is I'm giving counterexamples where nation states broke up and became new nation states without resort to violence. So yeah,
right, but
violence to go around the Canadian history. We all know that.
But we certainly know the American history as well and the history of the Civil War, so you can't disregard that. So, you know, this is a very delicate matter, and most people aren't even going to, you know, countenance the idea unless you present it very carefully and properly. But that's my opinion.
Yeah,
right.
Fair enough.
And what's I mean, what's your personal feel of what the rest of the United States would how they would react? What is the atmosphere towards Alaska right now? So see, like, would they say, because in California, you know, we found out that conservative states hate us. They want us out. We've talked to conservatives. They said, get out, you know, no problem. We'll let you go and stuff. But it may not be the same case with Alaska.
Well, right. I think Americans would generally say no, Alaska. They wouldn't let Alaska go because it's too rich in resources, mineral and otherwise. Yeah. So the imperial interest of the United States would override anything else there. California, a little different because there's a lot of animosity towards what's perceived as the, you know, overreaching California culture, I guess, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
They see us as dominant. How I'd have
right.
They do.
Yeah, they agree. I mean that they'd be better off without us. We agree we'd be better off without them.
Yeah.
And
or just not with with Californians like interfering with our laws and our
Right, exactly, and that's exactly what most of the people we talk to, and the same thing with Californians. We don't like the federal government, you know, telling us what to do either.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a win-win in that sense. But I was wondering, because of Alaska doesn't have. We have a certain hate from you know, red states, but Alaska doesn't. You don't feel that there's that thing of these Alaska. I mean, you guys are not like overbearing like California is as a state per se. So I don't see why there'd be animosity towards Alaska in any way, right?
No, I think if anything, there's jealousy towards Alaska. So they covet Alaska and they wouldn't let Alaska go. No.
Right, as a resource.
And of course, there's going to be the wags that say it's Russian plot to regain Russian America.
Well, Russia is there too.
But
and
let me jump in real quick. Let me jump in real quick if I could. Just to be clear. So you're in Montana.
I am now in Montana. Yes.
Okay, you're in Montana.
Alaska.
Do Montana people deeply love California and would be weak in the streets if we left? And they say,
no.
"Oh, I love all you. Oh my, no, don't go, come Montana."
Right? No.
No. Okay.
Montana people, probably most of them would not be too heartbroken.
Oh, wow. Well, that's not what the news here in California tells us. They tell us the total opposite, that you love us secretly, you can't admit it, you want us to bring your values to you, because you don't know good enough for yourself, and you need Californians to push it on you. But eventually you'll come around after we pushed our ways on you, and you'll realize that we were right and you were wrong. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah. Sounds somewhat delusional.
What? Hey, well, let me ask you the same question with Alaska. So in Alaska, do Alaska people say, I love California, I cannot wait to ban straws here, I would be crying in the streets if they ever left?
No, actually they call Anchorage Los Anchorage because of all the Californians that fly up there because they have cheap airline
Wow.
deals from Anchorage to LA. So a lot
Right.
of gangs and stuff moved up to Anchorage, and so again they're calling it Los Anchorage, and that they don't love it. No.
What? Shock. That's the total opposite of what the news here
Yeah,
in
the
California
news
has
is
told
telling
us.
us.
And not just
America would never let.
and not just
Our
the
country
news.
What's the disconnect? How did that?
Yeah.
How could the California news get it so wrong? How did that happen?
And the news is not the same. The Californians get it wrong because we have, and I want your opinion on this. Californians, when we talk about secession, they'll say, no, we can't do that because what about the other states? We need to help them. What's going to happen to them? They're going to just fall apart. We need to be there to help them. What do you feel? Do you feel that's a correct statement?
I think that's kind of almost like like an abuser saying, you know, they can't leave me because they won't be able to fend for themselves. They have to come back.
Yeah, it's exactly like the Californians feel like they're the mother of the country or the father, and you go, oh no, what happens if we leave he's not ready to go to college yet. He's not ready to graduate.
So progressive Americans don't want California to come and save them, like a parent.
I don't really think anybody wants anybody from anywhere else to come save them per se. At least I don't. I think people want to develop their own solutions in their own communities and their own states, you know, and Californians included. So yeah, that's what I think.
What's the disconnect? I just don't get how the news could be so wrong.
Well, if it was,
people would cry if we left, and that liberals in America want us to come and force our way on them to save them. Yeah. And yet when we talk to people from America, they say, hell no, where did you get that ridiculous concept?
Yeah, and they're insulted at the concept of, how dare you think that you're better than us and you solve our problems, you know? It's an insulting kind of statement.
Right, and we just have to remember we don't really have a free press. That's part of the problem. You know, the press is really just an extension of the ruling elite, and so it's going to parrot what they want it to.
Yeah, exactly. And you may have picked up inter alia. We kind of have the same problem here. That's why we keep getting the story wrong. Is that that's what they want us to believe.
Right. So they want to divide and conquer, right? Divide and conquer.
I was just going to say that it's divide and conquer, and it's
classic.
We're not just dismayed. You know, for Alaska, you're dismayed at it. We talked to different red states, and they're going, we don't like the federal government, you know, we have that in common, at least, that we don't want California telling us what to do, but we don't want the federal government either telling us what to do. State. And some of them even say, you know, we wouldn't be against seceding eventually if this gets really corrupt at the federal level, and we can't affect anything for our own state. So, you know, there's that thinking in there.
I think the Second Amendment is a prime example, because if the federal government were to proceed with outright gun confiscation, I think there are several states that probably would revolt.
Yeah.
And they keep misrepresenting the positions out here as being gun confiscation, which they're not.
Yeah,
they are not. They keep misrepresenting the positions out here.
Yeah, you know.
They misrepresent all positions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Badly.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of a cliche of what conservative America sees about California, because it's you know, it's always the negative things: the homeless, the this, you know, the gun laws, the immigrants, all the things, but there's so much more to California than that, of course. And
we have quite a rich history.
It's a state of 40 million people. I mean, it's not one view, one takeoff, and they kind of see us as these still these hippies, you know, that they don't understand. They go, we don't understand your values, your ways and stuff. But you know what? If you want to have them, fine, but don't put them on us. We don't have those values. And so, and we say the same thing. We go, you know, we stepped away from more rigid conservative ideology to you know, more liberal in a way that do whatever you want. You know, and it's the same thing. I think you know, both California and other states don't understand each other. I think the divide has been that now we we're going, well, America used to be different. We got along and stuff. We got along, but when things get really to the brink, then you start to see the divide in the nation that's been there for a long time, but was somewhat united because there wasn't this level of corruption in government and its power and stuff. And so now we're seeing, because of this, both sides seeing that as federal government being too much in their lives. Now we're seeing the divide, I think, of each state and their views on all that. So, I feel, and the important thing that we're having here with these discussions is I feel it's important for us to talk to different factions of the United States, liberals, libertarians, the far right, the far left, just to understand at least each other, and that really we don't agree on values, but we do agree on the same concept of freedom and of the states having power and being able to manage themselves, because we're each a bit different in values no matter what. Not one is the same as the other. Alaska is not like Alabama or
right.
You can't put it in a whole thing. So it's important, I think, to talk even between conservatives. We were saying conservatives don't know other conservatives that well in that fact. But they have a common value system, but they vary in distinct ways also. And like you were saying, that we need to have a discussion with that, so that people are not so divided and angry, because we can have a discussion. We have different views. Look, we're talking. We're not getting mad. We're not getting things. That's what the democracy is having different values. Really, not everybody's going to always agree, but to be tolerant of it.
And to be fair, it's not the states, other states, that are trying to impose their values on us, nor we on them. It's the federal government that's trying to impose whatever their agenda is at the moment on all 50.
Yeah.
Right, and that does appear to be the case.
Yeah.
I was just going to say I'm a counselor, so one of the things I talk to people about all the time, every day practically, are boundaries, interpersonal boundaries, healthy boundaries. And, the same goes for governments, states and federal governments between each other, just the healthy political boundaries. So you have healthy boundaries make healthy neighbors, or good neighbors.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, about five minutes, and then we
Go ahead.
go.
Do you have any?
One more question, and then we got about 5
Okay.
minutes to go, and then we'll give time over for whatever websites you want to plug or projects. One of the things that got me was that you had said that the Alaska Independence Party's plan to legally secede was to point out that they never legally, under international law, joined the state. That the people who actually lived in Alaska, the indigenous, largely were not allowed to vote, and that people were shipped in who weren't from there, and then can vote. And I had said, well, that sounds exactly the way that California was made a state. The people here were largely not allowed to vote. Yes, most of them had brown skin. And then people were trained in by the Transcontinental Railroad, lived here 1 to a year and a half, max. And then the Fed said, well, you must be Californians, we'll let you vote. And the people who lived here, you don't get a vote. And then that was taken as a legal vote to be a state. And you're saying Alaska looked at that and says, that's illegal. We should be able to go to the UN, the International Court, and say this vote needs to, at a minimum, be redone. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
And do you find it interesting the parallels between Alaska and California?
Yeah.
Well, that would suggest that it wasn't just a random happenstance, but there is indeed, like a imperial type of planning and behind it, right?
Sure.
Our first independence was a decade before the Bear Flag Revolt, which was about annexing California to the U.S. And yet it was with the Californians that the U.S. Army signed the armistice, such that at the time the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ceded California to the U.S., it wasn't under the effective control of the Mexican federal government. And so it would be like Taiwan or China ceding Taiwan to somebody else when they don't have effective control over it. Okay, so they did not have effective control over California at the time.
Well, and Hawaii has other
Nobody has to
issues too, right?
protect us.
Hawaii, same thing. Yeah, exactly. The same thing. So do you feel that you're not a Californian or anything, but do you think that California would be justified going to the international courts and you know getting them to see that we were basically somewhat annexed, and that it would be a good thing to revisit that possibly?
Take it down.
Well, it's a long time ago, but I mean, you know,
Yeah.
if it can be proven, I guess that would be a very interesting case. I don't know how it would work out, but why not bring up the history, document the facts. Why not?
Yeah,
Right.
the Venezuelans do the same thing when they claim a territory that they lost to Guyana. The Bolivians do the same thing when they claim a territory that they lost to Chile, their seacoast. Okay, they bring it up to the ICJ and says, look, you know, this was taken from us, it was robbed from us. And so, you know, these are, you know, century-old cases that are still active on the ICJ.
Yeah. And what do you think, also, like Alaska, if it were to be recognized by NATO, do you think that would influence the United States in recognizing, possibly, if you guys got to independence level and NATO recognized that, would that influence, do you think, the American system to be more willing? Or it would have no effect? It's just an international different thing.
Well, that was always part of the problem with Alaska. Who would defend it? Because the Russians are right there, and there have been those movements within Russia that would want to take Alaska back. So mutual defense is one of the considerations for any independence movement. So I don't know about NATO. I don't know. I mean, that's probably they would have to, you know, there would have to be some kind of continued alliance for mutual protection on North America.
Yeah, the contrasting North American cases. In order to prevail, the revolutionaries had to ally with their former enemy, France. They had just fought them in a war and defeated them.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and then they had to turn around and ally with them to survive. But you go to Canada and its independence from the United States, they needed the helps of the Brits to maintain, you know, their independence from the U.S. So it all depends on what situation you find yourself at the time. And as we saw in the two North American cases, it could change like that.
And if we do get California independence, we could be your ally, Alaska. We could be we're on the same coast. We could be there for you. We have a huge population. So you never know what the alliances are going to be. That's when you see world history, you see like bitter enemies, and then you see them allied, you know, at one point in history. And so you never know what's going to happen in a situation, you know.
2 minutes.
True.
So if anybody wants to say what you want on the whole
Okay.
thing.
Well, I would just say that I don't like to be fear-based, so I like to be, you know, strength-based and positive if possible, and so hopeful, you know, again, like I said, so my hope would be that any differences could be worked out, and perhaps we could prune back the power of the federal government and restrict it back to its constitutional limits and re-empower the states so that we don't have so many issues that we have to feel such angst about. Anyhow, that'd be my first hope, right?
Yeah.
So if people wanted to get more information, they can look there's two websites. One's for the Life and Liberty Party, so it's lifeandlibertyparty.com, and then my candidate website is johnrichardmyers.com, and Myers, that's Myers, so johnrichardmyers.com. So yeah, thank you very much.
What about
Any
the
other-
Alaska Independence? If people wanted to find out more about the Alaska Independence movement, is there a good
Okay,
website?
they have a website. Yes, they do. It's the AIP.org, I believe, AIP.org, and then the we have a Facebook for the Alaska Constitution Party as well. If people want to check out the Alaska Constitution Party. So.
Great. Any last words, anybody? Okay.
No, we're good. We're good.
Thank
Although
you
we
so much.
do want to keep the
All
conversation
right, you're welcome.
open, and
Yeah.
if you talk to other people in Montana or Alaska
Yeah.
who like to talk about independence, we would love to interview them.
Yes. Definitely.
Sure. Well, and I'll just put probably on my website at some point or somewhere that I'm, supporting your efforts and all that, as far as, because the public discourse is important. Again, differentiating. I'm not supporting California secession.
Yeah.
Not everyone can get that distinction, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you for that. And we're gonna send the video also.
Yeah, we'll send you a link to the video as soon as it's posted.
Okay.
As soon as this week.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll put that on my website.
Oh, that would be great.
And please refer to more people. We want to interview more independence people. We want to interview more conservatives. We want to interview more people from Middle America.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, and it's basically the discourse, what you're talking about to start the conversation. If we're going to change something, we have to have conversations with people that we don't necessarily agree with right now, and come to terms and see what we can do as a whole to gain back people power, basically.
Right.
That's the thing.
We're focused on the things we do agree on and build from there.
Yeah, exactly. And there are. People just always think that we disagree on everything. No, we're human beings, first of all. We agree we're human beings, and we have the same emotions, the same fears, the same, love, the same things. So we have something in common to go by. So yeah, that's absolutely. So thank you so much for being on, and we'll keep in touch. And Marcus will keep in touch.
All right.
The info.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a great rest of the Sunday.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.